Have you ever met someone who thought they were untouchable? Meet Morgan Sterling. On October 14th, 2023, Morgan walked out of a Boston courthouse with a grin that could cut glass. He had just divorced his wife, Emma, leaving her with absolutely nothing but a beat-up sedan and her clothes. He bragged to his friends that he had pulled off the heist of the century, hiding millions in offshore accounts and using a ruthless prenup to crush the woman he vowed to protect. But Morgan made one fatal calculation error. He forgot about Emma's father. He thought Arthur Vance was just a retired mechanic who fixed lawn mowers. He was wrong. Dead wrong. And by the time Morgan realized who Arthur really was, it wasn't just his bank account that was frozen. It was his entire life. This is the story of how a master manipulator got checkmated by the quietest man in the room. The rain battered the windows of the Gilded Oak, one of Boston's most exclusive private clubs. But inside, the air smelled of warm leather, cigar smoke, and victory. Morgan Sterling swirled the amber liquid in his crystal glass, watching the light catch the deep gold of the Macallan 25. He was 42, with the kind of jawline that graced magazine covers and the kind of eyes that assessed everything by its liquidation value. Tonight, he was the king of the world. "To freedom," Morgan announced, raising his glass. Around the mahogany table, his three associates, junior partners at his venture capital firm, raised their glasses in unison. "To freedom," they echoed, though their eyes darted around nervously. They knew Morgan's temper, but tonight he was in a benevolent mood. "So," asked Greg, a young analyst who worshipped the ground Morgan walked on. "Total knockout. Did she cry?" Morgan laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "Cry? Greg, Emma doesn't have the emotional capacity to cry. She just sat there, looking at her hands, like a scolded child." He took a long sip of the scotch. "Judge Holloway signed the decree at 4:00 p.m. sharp. The prenup held up like a fortress, ironclad. I keep the penthouse in Beacon Hill, the Hamptons estate, the portfolio, and the Tesla. She gets—" Morgan paused for dramatic effect, smirking. "She gets the 2016 Honda Civic and her personal checking account, which, last I checked, had about $4,000 in it." The table erupted in laughter. It was cruel, visceral laughter. "What about the alimony?" another colleague asked. "0, Morgan said, tapping the table with his signet ring. "I proved she was underemployed by choice. She has a master's in art history she never uses. The judge told her to get a job. It was beautiful. I walked out of there a free man, and she walked out looking like a homeless person who wandered into a courtroom. It wasn't just that Morgan had won, it was that he had decimated her. For 7 years, Morgan had slowly, methodically, built a life where Emma was merely an accessory, a quiet, pale ornament who hosted his dinners and managed his domestic life while he conquered the financial world. He had grown bored of her silence, her lack of ambition, and her quaint family background. He pulled out his phone. "Look at this," he said, sliding the device across the table. It was a text message from Emma, sent 1 hour ago. "The movers are finished. I left the keys on the counter. My father would like to speak with you before you change the locks. He says it is important." Greg snorted. "Her father? The mechanic? What's he gonna do, change your oil?" Morgan shook his head, retrieving the phone. "Arthur Vance. The man is a dinosaur. He spends his days tinkering with rusted tractors in a barn in New Hampshire. He probably wants to beg me for a loan to help Emma get an apartment. It's pathetic, really. Are you going to meet him? I have to go to the house anyway to make sure she didn't steal the silverware," Morgan said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. The bespoke suit hugged his frame perfectly. "I'll give the old man 5 minutes. I'll write him a check for $5,000. Tell him to take care of his daughter, and then I never want to see a Vance again." Morgan felt invincible. He had successfully hidden $3 million in shell companies based in the Caymans, money Emma's incompetent lawyer hadn't even sniffed out. He had a 24-year-old mistress, Chloe, waiting for him at the Four Seasons. He had just closed a deal to acquire a massive tech startup. He walked out of the club and into the waiting black SUV. As the driver pulled away into the rainy Boston night, Morgan Sterling genuinely believed the hardest part of his life was over. He didn't know that the text message from Emma wasn't a request. It was a courtesy warning. To understand the magnitude of Morgan's mistake, we have to go back to the beginning. Morgan met Emma 7 years prior at a charity gala. She wasn't the loudest woman in the room, nor the most glamorous, but she had a quiet elegance that intrigued him. She was wearing a simple vintage dress, no jewelry, standing near a painting, observing it with an intensity that made Morgan pause. When he approached her, he learned she was an archivist for a small museum. "And your family?" Morgan had asked on their second date, probing for connections, for status. "My father is retired," Emma had said softly. "He lives on a farm up north. He likes to fix things. My mother passed away when I was young." "So, humble beginnings," Morgan had noted, filing the information away. "Safe. Uncomplicated. No powerful in-laws to meddle in my business." Morgan visited the Vance farm only once, shortly before the wedding. It was a sprawling, overgrown property in New Hampshire. The house was a centuries-old farmhouse that had seen better days. The paint was peeling. The porch sagged. Arthur Vance, Emma's father, had greeted him wearing oil-stained coveralls and heavy work boots. He was a man of few words, with calloused hands and eyes that were a piercing, unsettling shade of grey. "You take care of her," Arthur had said, gripping Morgan's hand. It wasn't a threat. It sounded more like an instruction manual. She is distinct. She does not shout. So you must listen close." "I have plenty of money, Arthur," Morgan had replied dismissively, wiping his hand on his trousers. "She'll never want for anything." Arthur had just stared at him. "Money is noise. I'm talking about value." Morgan had laughed about that conversation for years. He treated the Vances as charity cases. He insisted on a prenup, claiming it was standard procedure for a man of his rising stature. Emma signed it without reading it. Arthur, present at the signing as a witness, had asked only one question. "Morgan, are you a man of your word?" "Absolutely," Morgan had lied. "Good. Then paper does not matter." Arthur had signed as the witness. For 6 years the marriage worked for Morgan. Emma ran the household with military precision. She never complained when he worked late. She never asked questions when he came home smelling of perfume that wasn't hers. She was the perfect grey rock, uninteresting, stable and there. But as Morgan's net worth ballooned into the 8 figures, his ego outgrew his need for a stable wife. He wanted a trophy. He met Chloe, a fiery marketing executive, and suddenly Emma's silence wasn't comforting. It was infuriating. He began the discard phase 6 months ago. He started picking fights. He criticized her clothes, her cooking, her lack of friends. "You're a leech, Emma," he had screamed one night in their marble kitchen. "You contribute nothing. I bring in the millions and you just exist." Emma hadn't screamed back. She had just looked at him with those same grey eyes she inherited from her father. "I contribute more than you see, Morgan." "Bullshit," he'd roared. "I want a divorce, and don't think you're getting half. You signed the prenup. You get what you came with." He expected a fight. He expected drama. Instead, Emma had simply nodded. If that is what you choose, Morgan, but remember, you chose this. Now, sitting in the back of his SUV, heading toward the Beacon Hill townhouse to kick her father off the property, Morgan replayed that moment. He chuckled. She was too weak to fight, he thought. She knew she couldn't win. The car pulled up to the curb. The lights were on in the townhouse. Morgan stormed up the steps, ready to perform the final act of his victory. He unlocked the door and threw it open. The hallway was empty. The art, his art, was still on the walls. The furniture was in place. It didn't look like anyone had moved out, except for a few boxes near the door. Sitting in Morgan's favorite leather armchair in the living room was Arthur Vance. The old man wasn't wearing his coveralls today. He was wearing a tweed jacket that looked 30 years old, with patches on the elbows. He held a cane in one hand and a folder in the other. "Where is she?" Morgan demanded, not bothering with a greeting. "She is gone," Arthur said. His voice was like grinding gravel. "She took the Honda. She's driving to the farm." "Good," Morgan sneered, walking over to the wet bar to pour himself another drink, asserting his dominance over the space. "And why are you here? I told Emma I'd give you 5 minutes. You want a check? Is that it? Severance pay for the in-laws?" Arthur didn't blink. He placed the folder on the coffee table. "I am here to collect, Morgan. But not money." "Then get out," Morgan snapped. "This is my house. According to the court order, as of 4 p.m. today, Emma and her family have no legal right to be on this premises. I could call the police and have you dragged out." Arthur smiled. It was a small, terrifying expression. It didn't reach his eyes. "You could," Arthur said softly, "but you won't." "Because the police in this district, the precinct captain is my godson, and the judge who signed your divorce decree today? Judge Halloway? I paid for his law school tuition 40 years ago." Morgan froze. The glass halted halfway to his mouth. "What are you talking about? You're a mechanic." "I fix things," Arthur corrected. "I have always fixed things. Sometimes I fix tractors, sometimes I fix companies, and sometimes I fix broken men." Arthur tapped the folder with his cane. "Sit down, Morgan. We need to review the inventory." "I don't have to listen to this insane ramble." "Sit down." Arthur's voice didn't rise in volume, but the authority in it cracked through the room like a whip. It was the voice of a man who had commanded rooms far more dangerous than a Beacon Hill parlor. Instinctively, Morgan sat. "You bragged," Arthur said, opening the folder. "I heard you at the club. Ironclad, you said. She gets nothing, you said. I won, Morgan said, though his voice wavered slightly. "It's legal." "Yes," Arthur agreed. "You divorced Emma Vance. You successfully separated your assets from hers. That was your goal, yes? To ensure that what is yours remains yours, and what is hers remains hers?" "Exactly." "Good," Arthur said. "Then you will have no problem returning what is mine." "I don't have anything of yours, old man." Arthur pulled a single sheet of paper from the folder. It wasn't a legal document. It was a deed. But not for the house. "Morgan, do you know who owns the land that the Sterling Holloway Venture Capital building stands on?" Morgan frowned. "We lease it. From a holding company, Orion Properties." "Correct," Arthur said. "And do you know who owns Orion Properties?" "Some conglomerate. I don't know, BlackRock." "Me," Arthur said. The silence in the room was deafening. The clock on the mantel ticked loudly. "You?" Morgan scoffed. "You live in a barn." "I live where I choose," Arthur said. "I bought that city block in 1978. I lease it to your firm. The lease expires." Arthur checked his cheap Casio watch. "At midnight tonight. I have decided not to renew." Morgan felt a cold sweat break out on his neck. His firm had just spent $5 million renovating those offices. If they lost the lease, the business disruption would be catastrophic. "You're bluffing," Morgan whispered. "Am I?" Arthur pulled out another document. "Let's talk about the house. You kept the house. A wise choice. It has appreciated value." "I bought this house," Morgan spat. "My name is on the mortgage." "The mortgage, yes," Arthur said. "But the loan, who services the loan?" "First National Bank of Boston. And I am the majority shareholder of the private equity group that acquired First National's Distressed Assets Division 3 weeks ago," Arthur said calmly. "You missed 2 payments last year, Morgan. A clerical error, you claimed. But technically you are in default. I have instructed the bank to call in the loan, in full, immediately." Morgan stood up, his legs shaking. "You can't do this. This is retaliation." "No," Arthur said, standing up slowly, towering over Morgan, despite being 3 inches shorter. "This is business. You wanted separate assets. You wanted to stand on your own 2 feet. I am simply removing the crutches you didn't know you were using." Arthur leaned in close. "You thought you were a self-made man, Morgan. But you were standing on my shoulders the entire time. I let you climb because you made my daughter happy. But today you made her cry. And the rent is due." Morgan stared at the old man, his brain misfiring. This had to be a joke, a prank. Arthur Vance was a nobody, a rural eccentric who smelled of diesel and sawdust. He couldn't be a titan of industry. "You're lying," Morgan hissed, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling my lawyer." "Call Silas," Arthur nodded. "Ask him about the Vance Trust. Ask him why he didn't run a deep background check on Emma's maiden name." Morgan dialed Silas with trembling fingers. Silas was the shark, the 1,000 an hour divorce attorney who had promised Morgan a total victory. "Silas, pick up," Morgan muttered. "Morgan?" Silas answered, sounding breathless. "I was just about to call you. We have a problem." "You're damn right we have a problem," Morgan shouted. "Emma's father is here claiming he owns my office building and my mortgage." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Morgan, listen to me carefully. I just got a call from the Bar Association. Someone flagged a conflict of interest in our filing, a massive one. Apparently, the firm that underwrites our malpractice insurance is dropping us, effective immediately." "What does that have to do with me?" "The underwriter is AV Holdings," Silas whispered. "Arthur Vance Holdings. Morgan, who the hell did you marry?" Morgan dropped the phone. It clattered onto the hardwood floor. Arthur watched the realization wash over Morgan's face. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He just reached into his folder and pulled out a 3rd document. "Now," Arthur said, "let's discuss the car." "The car?" Morgan stammered. "I gave her the Civic. I kept the Tesla." "No," Arthur corrected. "I'm talking about the vintage Porsche 911 you keep in the garage, the one you restored, the one you claim is worth $200,000. "That's mine," Morgan said defensively. "I bought the chassis and parts." "You bought the parts from a supplier in Germany called Vance Automotive Parts," Arthur said. "You haven't paid the invoices for the last 3 shipments. You put them on the company account, which you then wrote off as business expenses. That's fraud, Morgan. And since I own the supply company—" Arthur let the sentence hang in the air. "What do you want?" Morgan pleaded, his arrogance evaporating like mist. "You want money? I can pay you. I have millions in the Caymans." Arthur finally laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. "The Caymans," Arthur said, shaking his head. "The Redwood Shell Corporation, yes?" Morgan felt his knees give out. He slumped back into the chair. How do you know that name?" "Because, you idiot," Arthur said, his voice dropping to a growl. You set up that shell company using a referral from your banking contact in Zurich, a man named Mr. Heinrich. Mr. Heinrich has been my personal accountant for 30 years. He told me the moment you tried to hide assets from my daughter. Arthur leaned down, his face inches from Morgan. You didn't hide that money, Morgan. You put it in a box, and you handed me the key. Mr. Heinrich has already flagged the account for suspicious activity. It's frozen. The IRS has been notified. Morgan couldn't breathe. The walls of the townhouse felt like they were closing in. In the span of 10 minutes, he had gone from a multi-millionaire bachelor to a man on the brink of homelessness and prison. Why? Morgan whispered. If you had all this power, why did you live in a shack? Why did you let me treat you like dirt? Arthur straightened up, adjusting his tweed jacket. Because a man's true character is revealed only when he thinks no one is watching, Arthur said. I wanted to see who you really were. For 7 years, I hoped you would grow up. I hoped you would love Emma for who she is, not for what you could take from her. But you are small, Morgan. You are a small man in a big suit. Arthur walked toward the door. He stopped at the threshold and looked back. You have until tomorrow morning to vacate this house. The bank is seizing it at 9 a.m. Your office is locked. The security codes have been changed. And Morgan looked up, tears of rage and terror streaming down his face. Don't try to contact Emma, Arthur said. She is done with you. And if you come near the farm, well, let's just say the pigs are always hungry. Arthur Vance walked out into the rain, closing the door softly behind him. Morgan sat alone in the silent, dark house. He reached for his glass of Macallan, his hand shaking so violently the scotch spilled over his wrist. He took a sip, but it tasted like ash. His phone buzzed on the floor. It was a text from Chloe, his mistress. Hey baby, celebrating. When are you picking me up? Morgan stared at the screen. He had no car. He had no house. He had no office. He had no money access. He started to laugh, a manic, broken laugh that echoed through the empty rooms of the life he used to own. But the nightmare wasn't over. Arthur Vance was just getting started. Morgan didn't know it yet, but the true power wasn't just about money. It was about reputation. And by tomorrow morning, the entire city of Boston would know exactly what Morgan Sterling was. The morning sun over Boston was usually Morgan's favorite sight. It reflected off the glass skyscrapers of the financial district, a shimmering promise of money and power. But as Morgan stood on the sidewalk outside the Sterling Holloway Venture Capital building at 8:45 a.m., the sun felt like a spotlight on a crime scene. He was wearing the same suit from the night before. He hadn't slept. After Arthur left, Morgan had spent the night frantically logging into bank accounts, only to find red "Access Denied" banners across every screen. His personal checking, his investment portfolio, even his Amex Black Card portal. All locked. Suspicious activity reported. The notifications said. He needed to get to his office. He kept physical cash in a safe behind his desk. About $50,000. Emergency money. If he could get that, he could hire a criminal defense attorney, someone who didn't care about conflicts of interest. He marched toward the revolving doors, projecting an air of confidence he didn't feel. He nodded to the security guard, Ralph, a man Morgan had walked past for 5 years without ever learning his last name. "Morning, Ralph," Morgan said, keeping his head high. Ralph stepped in front of the turnstile. He wasn't smiling. "Mr. Sterling, I can't let you up, sir." Morgan stopped, a vein throbbing in his temple. "Excuse me?" "I own this firm, Ralph." "Step aside. I have my orders, sir," Ralph said, crossing his massive arms. Building management issued a restricted access list this morning at 6:15 a.m. Your name is at the top, along with Mr. Gregg and the other partners. Building management? Morgan laughed, a shrill, panic-edged sound. I am the tenant. We have a lease. Actually, a voice called out from the lobby seating area. Morgan spun around. It was a woman in a sharp grey suit, holding a clipboard. She approached him with the shark-like grace of a corporate executioner. Mr. Sterling, I'm Diana Prince, representing Orion Properties. Arthur sent you, Morgan spat. Mr. Vance is the majority stakeholder. Yes, Diana said coolly. But I'm here to enforce the eviction notice. Your lease expired at midnight. Your firm failed to renew under the new terms offered. We weren't offered new terms, Morgan screamed, drawing stares from the morning commuters streaming into the lobby. The offer was sent to your compliance officer yesterday at 4:55 p.m., Diana replied, checking her watch. The new terms required a security deposit of $10 million, payable immediately, due to the volatile nature of the firm's leadership. That's extortion. That's the real estate market, she corrected. Since the funds were not transferred, the lease is void. We have already begun changing the locks on the 40th floor. A moving crew is packing your personal effects as we speak. They will be left on the curb in roughly 20 minutes. You can't do this! Morgan lunged toward the elevator, desperation taking over. Ralph caught him easily, grabbing Morgan by the shoulder of his $5,000 suit and shoving him back. It wasn't violent, but it was firm. It was the physical manifestation of his loss of power. Don't make me call the cops, Mr. Sterling, Ralph said quietly. You don't want to go out in cuffs. At that moment, the elevator doors opened. Gregg and the other junior partners walked out, carrying cardboard boxes. They looked shell-shocked. Morgan, Gregg said, his voice trembling. What is going on? My login doesn't work. The servers are down, and this woman says we're evicted? Morgan looked at his team. These were the men he had laughed with last night, the men he had bragged to about destroying Emma. Now they looked at him, not with admiration, but with accusation. It's a mistake, Morgan lied. A clerical error. I'll fix it. Fix it? Gregg dropped his box. Papers spilled onto the marble floor. Morgan, the SEC is upstairs. They're seizing the hard drives. The color drained from Morgan's face. The SEC? They got a tip, Gregg hissed, stepping closer to Morgan. About the Cayman accounts, about the inflated valuation of the Techstar acquisition. They know everything, Morgan. They have the emails. Morgan felt the world tilt. The emails. He had been so careful. He used encrypted servers. Who? Morgan whispered. Who gave them the emails? Gregg looked at him with disgust. They said it came from an internal whistleblower, someone with admin access. Emma. The realization hit Morgan like a physical blow. Emma didn't just archive art. She was organized. She managed the home Wi-Fi. She had access to his laptop when he slept. For years, while he treated her like furniture, she had been silently, methodically backing up his hard drive. You ruined us, Gregg shouted, shoving Morgan in the chest. I have a mortgage. I have kids. You said we were untouchable. A crowd had gathered. Phones were out. People were filming. Morgan Sterling, the golden boy of Boston finance, was being shoved by his own employee in the lobby of a building he used to command, while an eviction lawyer watched with a bored expression. Morgan turned and ran. He pushed through the revolving doors and out into the street, the sounds of Gregg's shouting fading behind him. He needed to get away. He needed a plan. He needed Chloe. Morgan didn't have his car, so he ran 3 blocks to the Four Seasons Hotel. He was sweating profusely, his hair disheveled, mud splattered on his dress shoes, from a puddle he hadn't seen. He burst into the lobby. Chloe was staying in the presidential suite, on his dime, of course. She would know what to do. Her father was a senator. Maybe she could pull strings. At the very least, she had money. He had bought her diamond earrings worth 40 grand last week. They could pawn them for cash to flee the country. He took the elevator up, ignoring the suspicious looks from the concierge. He banged on the door of room 1402. "Chloe, open up! It's me!" The door opened. Chloe stood there, wrapped in a plush white robe, holding a cup of coffee. She looked fresh, rested, and annoyed. "Morgan?" She looked him up and down, curling her lip. "You look like hell. I thought we were doing brunch at noon." "Plans changed," Morgan panted, pushing past her into the suite. "We have to leave. Now. Pack your bags." "Leave?" Chloe laughed, closing the door. "Baby, I have a spa appointment at 10. I'm not going anywhere. Listen to me." Morgan grabbed her shoulders. His grip was too tight. "It's all gone. Emma, her father. They did something. The accounts are frozen. The office is raided. The SEC is involved. We have to go to the airport. We'll go to Tulum. I have contacts there." Chloe pulled away, shrugging off his hands. She walked over to the window, looking out at the public garden. Her demeanor shifted instantly. The bubbly, adoring mistress vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. "Frozen?" she asked. "Like all of it?" "Yes, but it's temporary. I'll fix it. I just need... Chloe, I need you to put the flights on your card. And maybe if you could ask your dad for a loan. Just 50 grand. To tide us over." Chloe turned around. She set her coffee cup down on the table. She looked at Morgan with a terrifying clarity. "Morgan," she said, her voice flat. "Do you know why I'm with you?" "Because you love me," Morgan said, though the words sounded hollow even to him. "Because we're soulmates. You said I was the only man who understood your ambition." "I love your ambition," Chloe corrected. "I love the penthouses. I love the access. I love the way people look at me when I'm on your arm." She picked up her phone. "But I don't love fugitives." "Chloe, don't be like this. We're a team." "We're not a team," she said, unlocking her phone. "We're a transaction, and your credit just declined." She tapped the screen a few times. "I'm calling security," she said calmly. "What?" Morgan stared at her, betrayed. "After everything I gave you." "You gave me gifts," Chloe said. "I gave you my youth and my time. We're square. But I can't be associated with an SEC investigation. My dad is running for re-election next year. If the press finds out I'm shaking up with a broke fraudster, he'll kill me." "You heartless witch," Morgan growled, stepping toward her. "I wouldn't." A deep voice boomed from the bedroom. Morgan froze. A man walked out of the bedroom suite. He was tall, wearing a police uniform. It was the precinct captain. "Captain Miller," Morgan stammered. "What are you doing here?" "Checking on a disturbance," the captain said, though his presence was clearly not a coincidence. "Miss Chloe called the front desk 10 minutes ago, saying she felt unsafe because her ex-boyfriend was harassing her." "Ex-boyfriend? We were together last night." "And now you're not," the captain said, resting his hand on his holster. "And since you are currently trespassing on a property you aren't paying for, I suggest you leave. Before I arrest you for the outstanding warrant regarding your unpaid vintage car invoices." Morgan looked from the captain to Chloe. Chloe was already back to looking at her phone, scrolling through Instagram, indifferent to the destruction of the man standing in front of her. "You knew," Morgan whispered to Chloe. "You knew before I got here." "Emma sent me a DM this morning," Chloe said without looking up. "She was very polite, warned me that your cards would bounce, saved me the embarrassment of trying to order room service." She's actually quite nice, Morgan. I don't know why you complained about her so much." Morgan backed away. The humiliation was total. His wife, the woman he called weak, had dismantled his entire support network with a few well-placed messages. He left the hotel room. He walked out onto the street. He had no money, no home, no job, no girlfriend. And then it started to rain again. Morgan spent the next 3 days sleeping in a 24-hour laundromat in South Boston, using his coat as a pillow. He survived on vending machine crackers bought with loose change he found in his pockets. On the 4th day, he used a payphone, a miracle he found one that worked, to call Silas, his lawyer. He had to beg the secretary for 10 minutes to put him through. "Silas," Morgan rasped, "please, I need help. I'll sign anything. I just want this to stop." "Morgan," Silas sounded exhausted, "I shouldn't even be talking to you. I've been disbarred." "What?" "The Bar Association. They found evidence that I knowingly helped you conceal assets. Arthur Vance's lawyers provided the documentation. My career is over, Morgan. I'm looking at jail time." "Me too," Morgan whispered. "Silas, is there any deal? Can we settle?" "There is one offer," Silas said. "Arthur's legal team sent it over this morning. It's a global settlement." "I'll take it. What do they want?" "Meet them at the Vance farm. Tonight, 6:10 p.m. If you're not there, the deal is off, and the federal indictment unseals tomorrow morning. How am I supposed to get to New Hampshire? I don't have a car." "Figure it out, Morgan. It's the only lifeline you have." Morgan hitchhiked. It was the ultimate degradation. He stood on the side of I-93 with his thumb out, rain soaking his once immaculate suit, which now smelled of sweat and mildew. A trucker named Big Al picked him up and drove him as far as the state line. Morgan walked the last 10 miles. He arrived at the Vance farm just as the sun was setting. The place looked different than he remembered. The grass was neatly cut. The house was freshly painted. The rusted tractors were gone, replaced by high-end agricultural machinery. He limped up the driveway, his blisters screaming. Sitting on the porch in 2 rocking chairs were Arthur Vance and Emma. Emma looked radiant. She was wearing jeans and a cashmere sweater, her hair loose and wavy. She held a glass of white wine. She looked 10 years younger than she had in the dreary townhouse in Boston. Arthur sat whittling a piece of wood. He didn't look up as Morgan collapsed onto the bottom step of the porch. "I'm here," Morgan wheezed. "I surrender. What do you want?" Emma stood up. She walked down the steps and stood over him. She didn't look angry. She looked disappointed. "Hello, Morgan," she said. "Emma, please," Morgan begged, looking up at her. "Call off the SEC. Call off the bank. I'll give you everything. I'll sign the divorce papers again. I'll give you the hidden millions." "I don't want your money, Morgan," Emma said softly. "I have my own." She gestured to the vast fields around them. "You never asked what my father did before he retired," Emma said. "You just assumed he was a mechanic because you saw him fixing a tractor. You never asked about the patents." "Patents?" Morgan blinked, confused. "Hydraulic systems," Arthur said from the porch. "Agricultural robotics. I hold 42 patents, Morgan. I licensed them to John Deere and Caterpillar in the 90s. I didn't just fix tractors. I reinvented them." Arthur stood up and walked to the railing. "We live simply because we like it," Arthur said. "Not because we have to. We value peace. You brought war to our doorstep." "I'm sorry," Morgan sobbed. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix the books," Arthur said. "Here is the deal." Arthur tossed a thick envelope onto the wet ground in front of Morgan. "Inside is a confession," Arthur explained. "You will admit to the fraud. You will admit that you acted alone, without the knowledge of your junior partners or your wife. You will take the fall for everything. In exchange, I will pay back the money you stole from the investors. I will make the clients whole. You will go to prison, yes, but it will be for 3 years, not 20, and your colleagues won't lose their homes." Morgan stared at the envelope. "You'd do that? You'd pay millions just to clean up the mess," Arthur said. "I don't like messes, and I don't want my daughter's name dragged through a trial." "And if I don't sign?" "Then I step back," Arthur said. "The feds take you. The investors sue you. You serve 25 years, and you die in a cell owing everyone money." Morgan looked at Emma. "Did you love me?" "Ever?" Emma looked at the horizon. "I loved the potential of you, Morgan. I loved the man I thought you could be. But that man never showed up. Only the Bragg arrived." She turned back to the house. "Goodbye, Morgan." With shaking hands, Morgan picked up the pen from the mud. He signed the confession. 2 years later. The concept of time changes when you remove the variables of money and ambition. For Morgan Sterling, time used to be measured in fiscal quarters, billable hours, and the microseconds of high-frequency trading algorithms. Now, time was measured in the rhythmic clack hiss of the automatic locks at Otisville Federal Correctional Institution. It was measured in the rotation of the guards, the weekly menu of starch-heavy meals, and the slow, agonizing creep of the sun across the concrete floor of his 8x10 cell. He sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at a spider crawling up the cinder block wall. In his previous life, he would have had the building fumigated. He would have fired the cleaning staff. Now he just watched it. He envied its ability to climb through the cracks, to slip under doors, to leave. Morgan looked nothing like the man who had toasted to freedom at the Gilded Oak. The bespoke Italian suits were a distant memory, replaced by a coarse beige jumpsuit that chafed his neck. His hair, once styled with $40 pomade, was thinning and grey, buzzed short to meet regulation. But the biggest change was in the eyes. The shark-like glimmer, that predatory assessment of what can I take from you, was gone. In its place was a dull, hollow resignation. He was inmate 7492B. He worked in the prison laundry, folding sheets that were never quite white, surrounded by steam and the smell of industrial bleach. It was honest work. It was the first honest work he had done in 20 years. "Sterling!" The voice bounced off the metal walls. Officer Ramirez stood at the cell bars, tapping his baton against the steel. "Get up! You got a visitor." Morgan didn't move immediately. He blinked, assuming he had misheard. "A visitor?" His voice rasped. He hadn't spoken since breakfast. "You have the wrong guy, boss. I don't get visitors." "I don't make the schedule, I just enforce it," Ramirez grunted, unlocking the cell. "Lawyer room. 5 minutes. Move it." Morgan stood up, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Lawyer room. Was it an appeal? Had Silas found a loophole, or was it worse? Had the feds found another offshore account he'd forgotten to declare? The terror of extended time washed over him. He had 18 months left. He couldn't do more. He physically couldn't survive it. He walked through the corridors, hands clasped behind his back, as per protocol, shuffling in his canvas slip-ons. He passed the recreation yard where other inmates were playing basketball, their shouts echoing in the yard. Morgan kept his head down. He had learned early on that eye contact was a currency he couldn't afford to spend. He reached the visitation block. It was a sterile room with fluorescent lights that hummed like angry hornets. There was a metal table bolted to the floor. Sitting at the table was not a lawyer. It wasn't Chloe, who he knew from the prison gossip rags had married a hedge fund manager in Connecticut. It wasn't Greg or any of his former friends from the firm. It was Arthur Vance. The old man looked exactly the same as he had the night he sat in Morgan's living room and dismantled his life. He wore a flannel shirt, a tweed jacket with patches on the elbows, and trousers that had seen better days. His cane rested against the table. He was reading a paperback book, completely at ease, as if he were sitting on his own porch rather than inside a federal penitentiary. Morgan stopped in the doorway. A surge of old emotions, shame, anger, fear, rose in his throat, tasting like bile. He almost turned around. He almost told the guard to take him back to the laundry. He didn't want this man to see him like this. He didn't want the architect of his destruction to see the ruins. But Arthur looked up. His grey eyes were calm. There was no mockery in them. "Sit down, Morgan," Arthur said. It wasn't a command, not like before. It was an invitation. Morgan sat. The metal chair was cold. He placed his hands on the table, noticing how rough they looked compared to Arthur's. The laundry detergent had dried out his skin. "What are you doing here?" Morgan asked. His voice was quiet, stripped of all its former bravado. "Did you come to check the warranty? Make sure I'm still broken?" Arthur closed his book, a collection of poems by Robert Frost, and set it aside. "I was in the area," Arthur said. "I had a meeting in New York. I thought I would stop by." "You don't have meetings," Morgan muttered. "You have tractors." "I have both," Arthur corrected gently. "How are they treating you?" Morgan let out a short, bitter laugh. "The service is terrible. The wine list is non-existent, and the company leaves something to be desired." He looked around the bleak room. "I fold sheets, Arthur. That's what I do. I fold sheets for 8 hours a day. I used to manage a portfolio of $400 million. Now I worry about corners meeting corners." "There is dignity in folding a sheet correctly," Arthur said. "More dignity than in selling a company that doesn't exist." Morgan flinched. The wound was still fresh. "I signed the confession," he whispered. "I did what you asked. I took the fall. Everyone else walked away clean. Greg is running a firm in Chicago now. Did you know that? He's making 7 figures. And I'm here." "Greg was a follower," Arthur said. "You were the leader, the burden of the crown, Morgan." "Why are you here?" Morgan demanded again, leaning forward. "You won. You destroyed me. You stripped me naked and threw me to the wolves. Isn't that enough? Do you need a receipt?" Arthur sighed. It was a heavy sound, like wind moving through old timber. He reached into his jacket pocket. Morgan flinched, instinctively expecting a subpoena, a lawsuit, another weapon. But Arthur only pulled out a small, rectangular photograph. He placed it face down on the table, covering it with his hand. "I didn't come to gloat," Arthur said. "I came because you wrote to her." Morgan froze. The blood drained from his face. 6 months ago, in a moment of desperate loneliness, Morgan had written a letter to Emma. He hadn't sent it through a lawyer. He had just mailed it to the farm. It wasn't a beg for money. It was just an apology. A rambling, disjointed apology about the years he had wasted. He hadn't expected a reply. He assumed she had burnt it. "She read it?" Morgan asked, his voice trembling. "She did," Arthur said. "She read it. She cried. I didn't mean to upset her. Tears are not always bad, Morgan. Sometimes they are just rain clearing the air." Arthur tapped the table with a calloused finger. "She wanted me to tell you that she forgives you." The words hit Morgan harder than any prison sentence. Forgiveness? He didn't deserve forgiveness. He deserved the cell. He deserved the silence. She forgives me?" Morgan choked out. "Why?" "Because she is happy," Arthur said. "And happy people don't hold on to poison. It's too heavy." Arthur slid the photograph across the table. He turned it over. Morgan looked down. The image was vibrant, full of colour, a stark contrast to the grey world he lived in. It was taken in the garden of the Vance farm. The apple trees were in blossom. In the centre of the photo sat Emma. She was sitting on a picnic blanket, laughing, her head thrown back in genuine joy, a look Morgan realised with a sickening pang he had never seen on her face during their marriage. Sitting next to her was a man Morgan didn't know. He wore a flannel shirt and jeans. He had a kind, bearded face and was looking at Emma with total adoration. But it was what was in Emma's lap that stopped Morgan's heart. A baby? A little girl, perhaps a year old, with wisps of blonde hair and bright, piercing grey eyes. Emma's eyes, Arthur's eyes. Who? Morgan couldn't finish the sentence. Her name is Clara, Arthur said softly. She just turned 1. Morgan stared at the child. He looked at the man next to Emma, the man who was living the life Morgan had deemed too small, too rustic, too boring. That man looked like a king. He looked content. She remarried, Morgan whispered. It wasn't a question. His name is David, Arthur explained. He teaches history at the local high school. He drives a truck. He doesn't know what a hedge fund is, and he doesn't care. He loves her. Morgan. He listens to her. Morgan traced the edge of the photo with his thumb. A tear, hot and humiliating, leaked from his eye and splashed onto the metal table. She looks beautiful, Morgan said. She looks free. She is, Arthur said. You were a cage, Morgan. A gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless. When the door opened, she flew. Morgan looked up at the old man. Is that why you showed me this? To show me what I lost? No, Arthur said firmly. To show you that the world didn't end. You were so terrified of losing, Morgan. You thought that if you lost your money, your status, your control, the universe would collapse. Look at the photo. The sun is shining. The trees are blooming. Life went on. Arthur leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a low rumble. I came here to give you the only thing you have left. Closure. You don't have to wake up in this cell wondering how to get her back. You don't have to scheme. You don't have to plan your comeback. It's over. The book is closed. So I have nothing, Morgan said, his shoulders slumping. You have the truth, Arthur said, and for a man like you, that is a rare gift. Arthur stood up. He adjusted his jacket and picked up his cane. The visit was over. The guard, Ramirez, was already stepping forward to escort Morgan back. Arthur, Morgan said. The old man paused. The money, Morgan said. The $3 million in the Caymans. The money I tried to hide. You paid it back to the investors? All of it? Every cent, Arthur nodded. And the interest. Why? Morgan asked, genuinely baffled. You didn't owe them anything. They were vultures. They would have eaten you alive if they could. Arthur smiled. It was the faint, enigmatic smile of a man who had seen seasons change for 70 years. Because, Morgan, I sleep very well at night, and I wanted to keep it that way. Money is just paper. Your name is your soul. I bought back the sterling name for you, even if you tarnished it. When you walk out of here in 18 months, you will be broke. You will be a felon, but you will not owe a debt to any man. You will be at 0. Arthur looked him in the eye. 0 is a good place to start. It's better than negative. Arthur turned and walked toward the heavy steel door. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. Time's up, Sterling, Ramirez barked. Morgan stood up. He didn't protest. He picked up the photograph. Can I keep this? He asked the guard. Ramirez looked at the photo, then at Morgan's wet face. He shrugged. Strictly speaking, No personal items passed during visits. But I didn't see it. Tuck it in your shoe. Morgan slid the photo into his sock. He felt the warmth of it against his ankle. He walked back to his cell. The corridor seemed different now. The walls were still grey, the air still smelled of bleach, but the suffocating weight in his chest had lightened. He sat back on his bunk. He didn't look at the spider this time. He closed his eyes and pictured the garden. He pictured the apple trees. He pictured Emma laughing. For 7 years, Morgan had tried to build a monument to himself, a skyscraper of ego, money, and control. Arthur Vance had knocked it down with a single push. But sitting in the ruins, Morgan realized something strange. The view was better from down here. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the stale prison air, and for the first time in his life, he didn't feel the need to be Morgan Sterling, the master of the universe. He was just a man who had made a mistake, a man who had been stopped before he could destroy everything. He lay back on the thin pillow. He had 18 months to go. 18 months of folding sheets. 0, he whispered to the empty cell. He could work with 0. Outside the prison walls, the wind picked up, carrying the crisp scent of autumn leaves over the razor wire, over the guard towers, and across the hundreds of miles to a farmhouse in New Hampshire, where a grandfather was currently pushing a swing and a little girl was reaching for the sky. The story was over. The life had begun. And that is the story of Morgan Sterling, the man who thought a prenup made him a king, only to find out that character is the only true currency. He learned the hard way that when you marry a quiet woman, you should check to see if her silence is weakness, or if it's just the calm before the storm. Morgan underestimated the power of a father's love, and the strength of a woman who knows her worth. He lost his millions, but he found his humanity in a prison cell, perhaps the only place he could ever really afford to be. What do you think? Did Arthur go too far, or did Morgan get exactly what he deserved? Let me know in the comments below with the word karma if you think justice was served. If you enjoyed this story of high-stakes revenge and redemption, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. I post new stories of drama, betrayal, and justice every week. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss a twist. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you step on while climbing out the ladder. They might just own the ladder.